My name's Charlie Trebay. I'm 36, going on 37. I'm an HIV advocate that works in this sector. I was born in South Africa and raised in America and in New Zealand. I was diagnosed in 2006 on my 22nd birthday and spent the longest time sweeping it under the rug, and now I'm living openly. I was in what I thought was a monogamous relationship. We decided to take the next logical step in any relationship, which would be having sex without condoms. We went to go get tested. I got my results back. It came back negative. My partner told me that he had got his results and that they'd also come back negative. We did away with condoms. It was wonderful. And then I got flu-like symptoms, night sweats, and another STI, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? I went and got another check a week before my 22nd birthday, and it turns out that I had seroconverted and was HIV positive. He was too scared to go and get tested. You know, we know that stigma is a barrier to every single step of the HIV response. It makes people too afraid to know their results. It makes people too afraid to take charge of their health. You know, I've moved entirely past the blame game because there's always an element of personal responsibility there. And I can, working in the sector, understand why you'd be too frightened to get your results. At first, I told my close friends. When I was diagnosed, it was a different time. It was 2006. And then, you know, the recommendation was to hold off treatment as long as possible. You weren't really linked into counseling or peer support services. The things that we know now are gold standard. So I left and I told a few friends and thought that I'd just get on about my business, take drugs, forget all about it, and go into a bit of a tailspin. One of my friends actually decided that they would run around telling people that I was HIV positive at the club. And so I sort of had the decision that I could either let somebody use my status as a weapon against me, or I could take charge of the narrative. So I went around, told everybody at the gay bar in Sydney that I had just been diagnosed HIV positive, and if you find out which one of these bastards told you, let me know. There'll be blood on the walls. It was quite an exciting time. I couldn't face HIV, and so I partied. I did everything to avoid taking care of my health and monitoring my health. You know, when I was first diagnosed, they told me that you can live many, many years without starting treatment, and so I thought, okay, business as usual, let's just avoid it completely. Some 7 years down the line, I had a viral load in the millions. I had a CD4 count in single digits. I had every single opportunistic infection you could have, but one of the AIDS-defining ones. I know that it's different in America. The second that your CD4 count goes below a certain level, that's an AIDS diagnosis. Certainly in New Zealand over here, what we're looking at is a collection of very specific AIDS-defining illnesses. So I had every one but any of those. So, you know, I was really lucky. It didn't feel lucky at the time. I was in and out of hospital. I probably spent, all up, 7 weeks in hospital over the space of 3 months. I'm 5'11", and I was down to 43 kgs. It's pretty hideous. The shame that stopped me from looking after my health, the shame that stopped me from thinking that I could have a vital, wonderful life and that I had love and something to give to the world. I think it's, you know, I moved back to New Zealand to take charge of my health and to undo all the damage that I've done by avoiding it. And through that, I sort of finally connected with peers. I finally saw how important a sense of community is. I saw that even though we're a really diverse community, there's so much commonality there. And the single most shitty thing about being HIV positive is stigma. And so that was sort of the turning point for me, because then I was like, okay, what the hell am I going to do about it? I've been given a second lease on life. I very much was told that if I had have held out any longer, I would have died. And so what do you do with that information? I want to make sure that other people aren't falling through the cracks like I did. And I want to mobilize and do something about it. That we're dishonest, that we're vectors for disease, that, it's something that can be passed on through, like, wanton sex, or that we're irresponsible. The reality of it is that actually in this day and age, people are knowing their status. They're going on immediate treatment. They have, provided they have access to great care, they're reaching undetectable viral load, which means that you could really just throw sperm all around the place and it wouldn't matter because, there is no conceivable risk, zero. And so, it's a completely different time. I think that we're taking a lot of our cues still from the 80s and from the 90s, and things have changed so drastically. And, that's part of the frustration of being HIV positive now in 2019, is that we're still dealing with outdated fears, outdated information. My morals and my upbringing. My mum was a buddy in the 80s in Austin, Texas, back when we didn't know much about HIV, and she was massaging people living with HIV. And so, I think that it's definitely been from my upbringing and my morals, that need to want to turn shitty experiences or challenging things into something positive and grow from it. Disclosing to my mum was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. Yes, my mum was a buddy. She worked in hospice care. She worked in massage. She looked after people that were either dying or committing suicide because the HIV and the medications or lack of medications were so horrible. When she stopped doing that and when we moved back to New Zealand, that's when her HIV knowledge sort of froze in that time period. So when I was diagnosed, I sort of rang her up on the phone. At first, I think I avoided her for like 6 months, and she was going to call the cops to try and find me because I was so frightened to tell her. And when I told her, she just broke down in tears because she was convinced that she was going to outlive me. We've both sort of grown a lot since then. As I've become more comfortable and confident, and as I know more about HIV, so does she. She's my biggest support system. She has encouraged me to live publicly with authenticity, to be an advocate. A mixed bag. I used to not be able to do it. I used to have the biggest internalized stigma, I think left over from contracting HIV from a partner and thinking that I was infectious. I think that also attitudes to HIV. I used to serosort, where I'd only have sex with other HIV positive people because it was just easier than having to disclose and get rejected and have knocks to your confidence. I think that now, though, I'm at a place where, because I'm living so publicly and because I'm living my entire life I'm sort of in the public eye with HIV, it means that those that have a problem with HIV don't message me because I'm frightening to them, because I operate at a different level and because I'll school them. The people that are really cool and know their stuff are around how to protect themselves, because sexual health is a singular responsibility. It does have collective benefit, but it's your own business to look after your own health. And so, I think that now we're getting all this information out there. I'm really empowered to look after myself. I know how to explain HIV. I know how to educate. And we're able to negotiate the parameters of relationship. And that makes it easy. I now know that HIV is no actual barrier for me to have a love life or a sex life and to have it be amazing. I think that the conversation always sort of falls on or the expectation is that people living with HIV need to announce it or tattoo it on our foreheads or what have you. I think that we're living in a really tricky time because the laws haven't caught up with the science. And so what that means is that actually we have scientific evidence that if you're on effective treatment, there's no way that you could possibly pass it on. But because the laws haven't caught up, depending on where you are in the world in different jurisdictions, there's laws about disclosure, even if you are taking necessary precautions, and what that might look like in a place. There's just recently somebody that was sentenced to 2 years, no transmission, because they didn't disclose their HIV status. They're undetectable. How do we navigate this sort of a world? Like, I think that HIV positive people shouldn't have to disclose until it's getting to the point where you want to share that information. I think that there's also, no other condition in the world has the sort of negative connotations still that HIV does, because it's attached to sex, it's attached to morality, it's attached to drug use, it's attached to all of the sort of darker parts of being human that people sort of freak out about. They're not even able to have sort of robust, confident discussions about sex. So, HIV is the boogeyman, and it just doesn't hold weight now with everything we know. I think U equals U is a really great leveler. It means that there's nothing to fear from HIV positive people. I think that it's, there are other mechanisms like PrEP that have, and to a lesser extent condoms, that have had sort of a trickle-down effect where people are still able to have sex with HIV positive people, and yeehaw, that can destigmatize a little bit. The fact of the matter is that, first and foremost, U equals U is about us. We're the you, and it's about taking charge of our health and being really proactive and being healthy and having long, vibrant sort of lives. And then you add in the sex component. The fact that we're able to do away with over 30 years of shame where we thought that we were infectious or to be feared, or because that's what the narrative was. So it's a game changer. Well, I think that for the longest time, white gay men have pulled all of the focus. I mean, they were getting the media coverage, it was a gay man's disease, that was always the sort of narrative. I think that, by its nature, transmission sort of, people, when they're responding to prevention and when they're responding to education, it's usually focused right in the inner city, and it's usually focused at MSM. And so, and it's focused in the same sort of language that is meant to be accessible to everybody, but isn't. When we're looking at Australia, we've just got our latest figures back where, the lowest number of gay male sort of MSM inner city diagnoses ever. I'd say that we're really hitting our targets there. I think that when we're looking at things like the 90-90-90, and when we're going to conferences and stuff, what it's sending a message is that these key populations, whether it be trans, whether it be Indigenous, whether it be people who use drug, that it's okay for them to be the 10% that consistently falling through the gaps. I was quite frustrated over at the International AIDS Conference in Amsterdam, because we're 2 years out from our UN targets, and everybody was complaining about, we're not going to hit those targets because we can't reach key populations. We don't know how. And, the fact of the matter is that we've always known how. You go to groups that are working in those communities. It's about self-determination. It's about people, and having more nuanced approaches than sort of a colonial way of thinking. And that does get frustrating, and we still get the airtime. We're just as wonderful and worthy of dignity and sex and care and being able to sort of not be privy to every facet of our lives as what you are. We're not living in a time where We sort of have to run around with a banner and announce ourselves. We're not living in a time where you have anything to fear from us. It's time that we actually start taking responsibility for all of our own sexual health, and then having sort of a level HIV playing field. Because, you know, the time for fear and ignorance is, well, it's 30 years overdue, really. I'm not as awful at public speaking as what I thought I was. I'm exponentially more resilient and capable than what I thought I am. You know, in those old days when I was sweeping everything under the rug and I was so terrified of people finding out, so terrified of taking ownership of HIV or even acknowledging it, to being somebody that is, I don't want to say that HIV defines me, but it's a very, very big facet of my life, and I love it and I'm happy about it, and it's my passion. For that change, to be able to turn something that for the longest time was negative, that could have killed me, into something that has been probably the greatest asset and the thing I'm most proud of in my life is, yeah, it's quite transformative.